Okay, so what issues did we have on the bike during the trip? Well, fortunately, relatively minor throughout. I think I'll probably put that down to a number of factors. First, good preparation in terms of planning for failure. Secondly, service the shit out of the bike throughout the whole journey. 4 major services, a number of minor services, lots of oil change. And fourth, probably a little bit of good luck as well, I'm sure. In terms of the issues that we had, initially a couple of fuel leaks in Australia, mainly I think down to lack of shakedown preparation before we headed off, and those were easily fixed. The RNG tail tidy failed miserably. It's just not designed for an enduro bike, fundamentally. Created a couple of issues. First, in terms of its fitment to the bike with the Rally Raid racks, spacers just didn't marry up correctly, which creates a lot of vibration in the rear rack. Therefore, the Rally Raid rear rack failed over a duration, fatigue failure in the metal here, and it was impossible to fix it whilst I was away. The lenses themselves cracked and fell out. The brake light gave up the ghost halfway during the trip, and I lost probably 5 number plates, I think, during the duration. So RNG tail tidy, no, you're going to go back to the standard tail tidy. As I said, Rally Raid rear rack failed. Again, I'm not sure whether it was down to a combination of that and the tail tidy, or certainly wasn't a lot of weight on it. Carried my spare, sorry, not my spares, carried my tools on it, which weighed probably about 2.5–3 kilograms, so not a lot of weight, but it did fail. Going to look into that as part of the rebuild. Side stand, bane of my life. A standard side stand on these bikes is just too long, fundamentally too long. Works sort of okay-ish when the bike's unloaded, but as soon as you put any substantial load on the bike, obviously when you're carrying luggage on the bike, it's just too long, impossible to put down and get back up again when you're on the bike, and the bike's too upright when it's standing on the stand when it's loaded. So I got 25mm cut off it in Perth, worked much better, but then some idiot reversed into the bike, snapped the side stand, and I had to have a series of welds done on the bike to get the thing to work. Bane of my life. Vulnerability of the Safari tanks, you've probably seen here, I've got some carbon protection now, which I actually got in Australia. Sourced these somewhere in Australia. But basically the bottom corner of these Safari tanks to me is just too vulnerable. Every time the bike goes down, these impact. And I'm just worried that even though the plastic's quite thick, the plastic will wear through, so I got some extra protection there. GPS mount. TourTech mount is mounted on I think what comes off a KTM 990 part, which fits to the Rally Raid front frame, and fundamentally, certainly on congregations, Australia just vibrates itself to death, and it suffered fatigue failure twice in Australia, and I eventually ended up simply cable tying both the mount itself and the TourTech GPS mount to the frame to stop it from vibrating. That worked, but shouldn't need to have that. There is another mount that you can mount actually on the bars itself, but for me it's just too close to the rider and too far down, like having the GPS on the line of sight. So that failed. You probably can't see it on the video, but the stickers, the Rally Raid stickers, all over the bike, suffered pretty badly, and they're going to have to be replaced. The other small problem I had on a number of occasions was the fuel vents, for some reason, just didn't work. Both the front vents and on the auxiliary tank I had certainly this tank expanded at one stage so much I couldn't get my foot on the gear pedal, so I had to take the tank off, push it back into shape while it was still warm, and then replace the tank. And this one had a similar problem, so I'm just not sure why that happened. But those generally were the only problems during the trip. So what did we do in terms of servicing? Well, we had 4 major services, one in Perth, which substantially, probably the biggest out of the whole trip. It was mainly because of the hard time the bike had in Simpson and Gibson deserts. demolished the clutch pack. So we had to have the Recluse plates and the XP discs replaced in Perth completely, and a couple of oil flushers to get rid of all the fibres out of the oil system. And at that point as well, made a decision to change a lot of the things like steering head bearings and everything, which had a really hard time on calibrations and stuff. The only thing that really required fixing was the clutch pack. Everything else was more preventative than anything else, but I had a major service there. Another one in Sydney before we went to South America. And in South America, a couple of preventative maintenance services as well, one in Lima and one in Santiago. In between, lots of oil changes, got down eventually to changing the oil about every 2,000 kilometres, just to make sure that the Recluse clutch pack lasted the trip. And tyres, went through 7 sets of tyres in total during the trip. The rear tyre would last no more than about 3,500 kilometres. The Hyundai's done a bit better than that, but not done a lot of off-road on the Hyundai. Tried everything: Continentals, Metzlers, Michelin, just about every brand there is out there. Dunlop as well. We could only get about 3,500 kilometres out of the rear. And on one occasion, the front in northern Peru, on a lot of the tight and twisty stuff and descending stuff, that wore down really quickly as well. And that was a Dunlop 908 front. But basically 7 sets of tyres during that. 2 punctures, both caused by nails, no other pinch flats or anything, even though we were running pressures down as low as 12 psi in the sand, and no rim locks throughout. Hey. So to that extent, things worked really well. In terms of life on the road with the bike, this bike is superb. It really is. I think the only annoying bit, I guess, is some of the long distance work on some of the pavement that was inevitable, and prepared for that, to be honest. Vibration is obviously pretty extreme on the pavement, and just got to put up with it, because frankly off-road there's nothing beats this bike. What do we do in terms of setting it up for that variation of terrain? Well, not a great deal, other than didn't really tweak that much with the suspension settings once I had it set up at the beginning. Didn't really touch the fuel map either, and certainly didn't use the bad fuel map, despite some of the places we were picking up fuels, and never really had any issues. So really fuel mapping, suspension tweaking, left for the experts. For me, it's things that you don't really need to worry about too much, just enjoy riding a bike. In terms of fuel economy, while we're on the subject, really good fuel economy, 24 kilometres per litre in general, down to about 19 or 20 kilometres in the deep sand sections, and maybe at high altitude as well, but was generally getting about 650 kilometres out of the 27 litres total capacity on the bike, which is really good. No real niggles apart from the vibration on the tarmac. I just love riding this bike for lots of reasons. Comfort, well, got a Rensko custom seat fitted, never had a sore backside throughout, superb. What would I do different if I was doing this trip again with the bike? Probably not a lot. Orangey tail tidy, definitely wouldn't go on there. Pay a lot more attention to the Rally Raid rear rack. Not sure what to do about the GPS. I don't see any other solution out there in terms of a mount for that. Don't mind the cable ties. So really not a lot. Will probably carry more parts with me on a just-in-case basis. Save a lot of time waiting for parts in service centres. So what next for the bike? Well, definitely going to keep it. We're going to strip it starting this week and get down to the basics of rebuilding the engine and plan for the next trip in 2017. Until we strip the engine, don't really know what shape it's in. I suspect we'll maybe have 1 or 2 issues developing with the cam chain tensioner, sounding a bit rattly at high temperature on first starting up. But we'll not see until we take it apart. Further report on that later. And just really to wrap up in terms of special mentions and thanks to the people out there that have helped along the way. Obviously Drysdale, in terms of where the bike came from, advice along the way, helped me build the bike before I got got it out to Australia. Rally Raid, not only for the gear itself, which is now, in my opinion, well tried and tested. You know, it's good quality for the price. You know, it's not all carbon fibre and sexy Evo stuff, but it works. It certainly works. And more importantly, the customer service since I've been away really has been excellent. Liz at Rally Raid has helped me a few times, so thumbs up to Rally Raid. Reactive suspension, Gareth Evans down reactive suspension, sorted forks in the shop for me before I went away, and been brilliant. That's why I've not needed to tweak it, because it's got such a range and capability far better than the standard bike. KTM West in Perth in Australia. Special mention must go out to Dave, the mechanic at KTM West. Best mechanic I've ever come across that works at KTM. The guy was superb, sorted my clutch out 100%. Profil fuel filters in Tasmania. Small company most of you probably don't know about, but certainly recommend them. These guys have developed a pre-filter screen for the fuel pump, and also they do tank filters for your fuel necks as well. Invaluable, saved my fuel pump anyway for a relatively minimal cost. And of course Woody's Wheel Works for the wheels that never fail. So those are the main ones. Many others. So there's stuff that's fitted to the bike in terms of technology, automatrix, and I'll come on to that in terms of discussing some of the technology stuff later on, but those are the special mentions, and thanks.